Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel and the 2025 Festival of Tours. I'm Lisa Friend, and I'm delighted to be your moderator this evening as we cover the countries of Austria, Germany, and Switzerland. And we have all the slap dancing, kebab eating, and yodeling fun that you can handle. Now, tonight's show is the fifth in our series of the 2025 Festival of Tours. And we also are about halfway through the festival. And so you can see here Monday, April 28th, Germany and Austria, Switzerland tours. We have half of the travel festival left to go. And we're going to end it on Friday, May 2nd with our best wow moments on tour. And a wow moment for sure will be when Rick gives away 2 seats on a 1-week city tour. You can choose from Paris, Rome, Istanbul, or London. That's the giveaway, and you will be entered when you register for the Zoom link, or you can go on our website and see the registration there, or it's also being posted into the chat feature. Now, everyone is a winner for 2026 tours because we have our early booking discount. No promo code needed. It's automatically applied when you sign up for a 2026 tour, and that is going on until July 7th. We have 46 different itineraries for you to choose from. So there's something for everyone, I do believe. Now, if you can't wait until 2026, we do have 2025 tours that are discounted on our website. Now, tonight we are talking about Germany, Austria, and Switzerland tours. And to start us off, we're going to say willkommen to my friend, Dave Hoerlein. Dave, I'm going to put you up on this screen, and I'm so excited to introduce you to everyone because you are the first Rick Steves tour guide whose name wasn't Rick Steves, and you've been a mentor to all of us. And I'm going to just tell the audience right now that you are one of the nicest guys that they could ever have the pleasure to meet.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Lisa. I hope I can live up to that. Yeah, you're right. I've been working for Rick for over 40 years now. Half of that time I led tours. So 2 decades of tour guiding. It's a job I loved. I gave it up to focus on the map making that I also do. But as you and Jim know, tour guiding is something that really gets in your blood, right? It's a rewarding job, a unique job, and it's hard to say goodbye to it. But when I said goodbye to it, I was very confident that people like you, Lisa, and then Jim, who we'll meet in a second, were the up-and-coming guides. Of course, Lisa, you're a veteran guide now, but those up-and-coming guides just carry the torch. And the tours have changed over the years, but the same spirit remains. And I'm just proud to be a part of the organization for that.
But you haven't given up traveling. Do you have any plans this summer?
Well, as you know, my wife is Danish, and so we go to Denmark every year. So we look forward to heading back to the old country, and I dust off my rusty Danish skills, and it's great to be back there. I look forward to doing that in July this year.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to turn this ship over to you, Captain.
Great. Sounds good. I want you guys to take a trip with me. We're going to go over to Berlin. So from Seattle, I'm hopping in a plane. I'm flying over the Rockies, the Mississippi, East Coast, crossing the Atlantic, heading into Central Europe to Germany, where there's this beautiful city called Berlin. And that's where Jim McDonough lives. And Jim is going to help me with this trip. And we're going to take you on a virtual tour of Europe. Jim, how are you? V. Gates.
Hi, Dave. Hello. Yeah, good evening, or guten Morgen is what I would say here. You can see behind me that it's still dark out here, early hours of the morning.
What time is it there now?
3 o'clock in the morning here, 3:05. So
now they say Berlin is the city that never sleeps, but what would you say? It looks dark out there, but are there still some people out there enjoying a few beers?
yeah, there are. I mean, if I go about 7 minutes down in this direction, there's one of those Berlin Eckkneipas or corner bars that's open 24 hours. And if I go in that direction about 5 minutes, there's a Turkish kebab place where I could get some food. So if I go over to my window here and open it up, I'm sure I'll hear some hooting and hollering here at some point. So yeah, it never sleeps here, even out here in the suburbs.
Great. Well, why don't we pretend we're on tour and you're introducing yourself to the group for the first time? What do you say?
Yeah, well, I've been a local guide here in Berlin for 18 years now. I came here as a college student 20 years ago from the University of Minnesota, where I'm originally from, to finish my studies in German history. And I ended up just staying here after I graduated and making Berlin my home. And so for several years now, I've been the local guide for Rick's tour groups that come to Berlin, doing the historical walking tour for them. And eventually I was offered the opportunity to lead Rick's Germany, Austria, Switzerland tours. And now next weekend, I'll be kicking off my 4th season doing just that. And yeah, as you can see in the picture that you've just brought up, I got myself in trouble by getting involved with a Fräulein years ago, a Berliner who grew up in the former East Berlin. And we eventually got married. And now we have 9-year-old twins. And in that picture there, Dave, you can see that would be us down in Bavaria about 4 or 5 years ago on a little family vacation. And of course, Bavaria is going to be a topic that we'll be talking quite a bit about this evening, Dave.
Yeah, and speaking of Bavaria, I noticed you're wearing lederhosen in that one image.
Yeah, my wife always rolls her eyes when I bring out the lederhosen. You know, she always says, when we go to Bavaria, can you just act normal for once? Because of course, up here in the north where she's from, you wouldn't wear something like that out on the streets of Berlin. But if we go down to Bavaria, I really like to, yeah, go the full 9 yards and bust out the lederhosen, which I wear on tour when I take my groups to Oktoberfest now.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, I dusted off my Bavarian jacket and they told me this was a Bavarian wedding shirt. I'm not sure if it is, but it's kind of fun to wear the clothes sometimes.
Right.
Great. So I'm going to say a few words about Rick Steves tours in general. First of all, on May 8th coming up, we're going to have a show about our Tours 101 presentation that talks about the various aspects of Rick Steves tours. There's also one that we did back on April 22nd, and that one can be found on our website. A few basic things about our tours, though. First of all, we like to broaden perspectives. We think that travel is really an education, and our guides are really trained to help you get the most out of that and to really learn about what's going on in Europe. Our groups are small. We don't pack you onto a bus like a bunch of sardines. We have hotels right in the center of town, right in the middle of the action, so you don't need to commute to see the sites you really want to see. We focus on local experiences, and we work hard to kind of help you interact with local people and then do things that are a little less typical. Packing light is crucial. That's been one of Rick's mantras for almost 50 years now. So we really encourage that, or strongly encourage that. We do plenty of walking on our tours. We think that's really the best way to see a city and also, of course, the beautiful landscapes of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Your tour guide team really is a Rick Steves guide. Plus, along the way, we often hire local guides. So you kind of get those two twin perspectives. And finally, our tours don't have any kickbacks involved. It's important to remember that we're on your side, and the guides want to make sure you have the best experience possible. You've paid the price up front for the tours, and you're not going to get nickeled and dimed along the way. Our groups, that's what kept me doing tours for 20 years. Our groups are lively, interesting, come from a variety of backgrounds, and there's a pleasure to take through Europe. And it's interesting that I believe now 40% of our tour members have been alumni. They've taken tours in the past. So you're starting the tour with a good group of people that really understand the way Rick Steves tours go. Rick likes to train our guides either directly or indirectly. Here's him training. Well, I don't know how much training is going on with a beer there, but it's Rick with one of our guides, Holger, in a park in Berlin. We do have a lot of different guides, and this is only a sample of some of the guides that lead our Germany, Austria, Switzerland tours. Our guides are kind of like a brotherhood. You know, we all get along, we share information, and when we get together here in Edmonds, near Seattle, where Rick's office is, that happens every year or so. It's always a pretty good party. So, Jim, do you want to tell us about some of your fellow guides?
Yeah. Yeah, these are obviously, yeah, colleagues of ours who will likely, be your guide if you take a tour whose itinerary goes through Germany, Austria, or Switzerland. We've all been tour guides for years in some capacity. We come from a variety of different backgrounds. Starting in the upper left-hand corner there, that's Donald, who's originally from Scotland. And he is a legend at Rick Steves Europe, having been a very beloved guide for many, many years, and who leads a number of itineraries. And then underneath him is Andrea. She's from Austria, who, as you can imagine, brings some unique hometown perspectives to her tours as she's leading her groups through her home country. And yeah, then I guess you've met me, the small town kid from the Midwest. And down below there in the lower right-hand corner is Holger, who was having that beer with Rick there in the park. And he's originally from the Frankfurt area, but he came here to Berlin back in the 80s before the wall fell. So, he's got tons of stories and experiences of his own to share with his tour members. And then you can see Gretchen and Tara above Holger, and Dave, they do these tours as well through Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, but also work with you in the office there in Edmonds, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah. In the upper right, Tara works in our guide services department, and she, like Jim, is from rural Minnesota. And I know she's lived in Germany and loves those countries. She's also a mentor and part of our guide services department, helps train other guides. And then Gretchen to the left of her has also lived in Germany, a very enthusiastic escort on our Alps My Way tour that we'll talk about at the very end of this presentation. So you may have one of these faces on tour, you may have somebody else, but all of our guides are wonderful and well trained. One of the ways they get trained is on a training tour with Rick Steves. And you took one of those a few years ago, right, Jim?
Yeah, I did. It was such an invaluable experience. It was my first time to Italy. That's where the training took place. And my first time to Italy, Rick Steves was my tour guide. So that was a thrill in itself. But you really get to know the Rick Steves way, running an efficient ship. And yeah, just trying to make sure that you are able to go ahead and do the way that Rick would hope that we run an efficient ship. And I had such a wonderful time meeting new colleagues. And a lot of what I learned with Rick, I was able to not only apply to the tours that I lead, but then also as a local guide in Berlin, I was able to really use that experience as well to make my tours here even a lot better.
Fantastic. Yeah. Nothing like learning from the master, that's for sure. I guess as a map maker, which is my main job these days, I always like to start our presentations with where the heck are we? And of course, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and we throw in the Czech Republic because we'll talk about Prague a little bit too. These are mainly landlocked countries in Central Europe. Germany does have some coastline in the north. To give you a sense of the size, I think Germany is roughly Montana sized. And so I think I've read that if Germany was a state in the US, it would be the sixth biggest state. So it's quite a big geographical area. And of course, especially in the southern part of these countries, Bavaria and Germany, Austria, Switzerland in particular, it's very beautiful and mountainous. It's important to remember, though, that these borders have not always been like this. This green blob at the top shows how Germany looked in the early 1800s. It was the Kingdom of Bavaria, it was Prussia, it was some duchies and dukedoms and all different kinds of things that were unified together finally in the 1870s. And then take a look down here at the Habsburg Empire with Vienna. That used to be a huge empire, and Vienna was right in the center of it. Of course, that's been chopped up basically since World War I into many smaller countries, the ones in the former Yugoslavia, Czech Republic, parts of Poland, and other countries. So our guides are really good about teaching you about how the borders of Europe used to be and how they are today and why that is. Jim and I are going to talk about 8 topics that help, I think, paint the picture of what's special about Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And I'm going to tell you, maybe you've heard already, that we use the acronym GAS quite a bit. So we're going to probably refer to GAS more than we will enunciate Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. But the cuisine is one part of it, the beer and wine, the traditions, incredible landscapes, history, art and architecture, fabulous music, and of course, people. So we'll dive into those now. First of all, the cuisine. When you go to this part of Europe, you are not going to go hungry, whether it's fondue in Switzerland or Wurst in Germany or the luscious Sachertorte in Vienna. Hunger is forbidden. It's also a very regional cuisine. And if you look at this slide, Jim, what can you tell us about it in terms of what it is and where it is?
Well, that was, excuse me, that was taken in Bavaria. The tablecloth gives that away right away because that design pattern of the white and blue represents the state of Bavaria, of which Munich is the capital. And the sausage there in the picture is something that you'd call a Weisswurst, or a white sausage. It's mostly made of veal, and you often eat it with a freshly baked pretzel, sweet mustard, and it's always nice to wash down with a beer. I prefer a wheat beer when I have white sausages, but you know, Dave, you could actually have it with some coffee as well.
Wow. Is that what they eat in the morning in Munich? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that's what they will normally eat in the morning. That's why, you know, you can have a coffee with it. Although if you're eating a coffee or drinking a coffee and eating it at a beer hall, it might look a little unusual to a local. But then again, you know, if you're walking by a beer hall with outdoor seating at 9 o'clock in the morning and you see somebody drinking a beer and eating white sausages, that might seem a little unusual to us, but it's certainly a real Bavarian ritual in a place like Munich, for example.
Yeah. Wow. And of course, this slide also talks about the bounty of Germany, especially when it comes to its breakfast. And actually, this is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. You know, I love Italy quite a bit, but those Italian breakfasts get old after a while, just with a little bit of cappuccino and a dry roll. In Germany and Austria, Switzerland, the table is laden every morning with cheeses and breads and hard-boiled eggs and yogurt, and yes, sausages if you're so inclined. So again, hunger is forbidden, and it really starts with a big breakfast in the morning. Beer is also a big part of the culture there. And what do you have to say about German beer culture, Jim?
Well, it's taken quite seriously here. And you can see this in many ways, but I'd have to say that the most noticeable way is the way that the beer is drunk. And it typically comes in two sizes. You have large, and you then also have very large. And sticking here with this one, this is what's called a Mass beer, or just simply a Mass, and it's a 1 liter mug. So you can fit about 34 ounces of beer here, and in this particular mug here, and it's fun to drink out of, but it's typically drunk in the south, especially in Bavaria, where it goes hand in hand with a more laid back, kind of relaxed atmosphere, especially if you go into like a beer garden, for example, where you can get a hearty meal. You plan on staying there for a while. It's really part of the regional identity. Whereas up here in the north, in a city like Berlin, where you have a more fast-paced urban setting with lots of bars and taverns, this generally favors something smaller, like the half-liter mug, or can fit about 17 ounces of beer in this. And actually, you can also, here we go. You can also get something even smaller at this Eckkneipe, this corner bar down at the end of the street that I referred to before. Here you've got 10 ounces of beer, and this makes for maybe a quicker round, making you maybe socialize more quickly, and then you move on to the next place. So, yeah, really interesting stuff, Dave, when it comes to the beer culture here and the way that it's drunk.
Wow, great. Thanks. And of course, wine is a big part of the German culture as well. Wine in Germany tends to be the Riesling grape is really the main grape, and people often think of German wine as being quite sweet, but it actually is across the board. You can get it drier if you want. That word trocken means dry. Halbtrocken is something in the middle. If you want something sweet, you ask for something lieblich or loving, I guess would be how you translate that. And if you like sweet wines, some of the German late harvest wines are just great for sipping after dinner. But you don't need to have sweet wine in Germany. They have all different kinds, primarily white, but they have some reds as well. The traditions are really important in this part of the world, whether it's going to a coffee house in Vienna and having that famous soccer tort with a big glob of whipped cream. The cows are a big part of the culture in the Alpine regions. This is in the Appenzell area. And then the costumes or the clothing that people wear, we tend to look at them as Americans as costumes, but people really do dress that way, don't they, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, typical Bavarian clothing. The ladies typically wear a dress that's called a dirndl, and men wear lederhosen, so these kind of soft leather pants and a button-up shirt, and sometimes a vest like what the gentleman sitting here in the picture next to the ladies is wearing. And these are worn at festivals like Oktoberfest or even at formal occasions, weddings, anniversaries, celebrations, and so forth. But again, down in Bavaria, you certainly wouldn't wear something like that up here in the north. And yeah, it really shows you, Dave, and highlights the cultural differences within Germany's own borders today here.
Great. The landscapes in this part of the world are nothing short of fabulous. One of my favorites is in Bavaria, where those rolling hills of Bavaria meet the Alps. That's where you see the castle of Neuschwanstein. But the Alps are everywhere. This is in eastern Switzerland. And the thing about it too is there's beautiful landscapes, but they're also very accessible, meaning there's all kinds of lifts that can whisk you to the top of these peaks, so you can enjoy them with a minimum of hiking. Of course, if you want to hike up, you're more than welcome to, but if you don't feel like hiking, take the lift. A lot of different ways to come down as well, right, Jim?
Yeah, this is the luge, and this has been a part of life in southern Germany, Alpine Austria, and parts of Switzerland for centuries. And at first people used sleds just as a transport or to transport and move stuff through the snow. But pretty soon they figured out that a lot of fun could be had if you just got on them and just rode them down a big hill after a snowfall. And so when tourism in the Alps really, got going in the 1800s or end of the 1800s, early 1900s, hotels and resorts started building sledding tracks for their guests, sort of as an alternative to just activities beyond skiing. And now, as you can see here in the picture, we've even got these summer luge tracks where you ride a sled down a track built into the hillside, typically around some very beautiful scenery. And then you've got a lever that you push to go and pull back to slow down or to stop. And it's super easy. It's super fun. People of all ages can do it. And something, Dave, that I really try to do with my groups when I can, and something that I'm sure that you've done with your groups in the past as well.
Oh yeah, a few times. I used to, I mean, the only hard thing is sometimes when the weather isn't quite right, you can't always do it. But when we can do it, when the weather's right, it's certainly a highlight. And speaking of that, you see that wow there, everybody. That's a reminder to Jim and I that we keep track of the wow moments that our tour members have, and this is definitely one of them. This part of the world also has history and living history, meaning much of it that we tend to focus on tends to be the 20th century. But there's plenty of medieval history as well. But it's that 20th century history, and particularly World War II, that I think is really vivid there. And these side-by-side images show the Reichstag, just after the war, and then today. This is a very important building in German history, isn't it, Jim?
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, today it serves as the seat of the German federal parliament. It is a building that has witnessed a whirlwind of history. It was first built as the seat of the German Empire back in the 1890s. It then became the site of Germany's first democracy after World War I, until the Nazis were voted into power and destroyed that democracy back in 1933. And that building, Dave, actually played such a pivotal role when it came to the Nazi seizure of power, because it was back in 1933 that the Reichstag there was the target of an arson attack. And the Nazis used that fire as a pretext to pass emergency legislation, which allowed them to set up their own police forces to arrest their political opponents. And this cleared the way for the passing of the legislation that gave Hitler dictatorial powers thereafter.
Wow.
And As you can see in the picture there on the left, at the end of World War II, in the spring of 1945, the Reichstag became a focal point of just ferocious fighting in the battle for Berlin, which was raging on in this city 80 years ago right now. But today, the Reichstag simply symbolizes democracy. And as you can see in the picture on the right there, that iconic glass dome lets visitors walk to its top for just an amazing bird's eye view of the city. And it's free to do. And I think, yeah, Dave, you can really agree with me that it's just a beautiful building today that has just gone through such a tumultuous history.
Yeah, amazing. And of course, history is happening even today. And sometimes it's hard to understand that history, but our guides are really good about making those bridges between the past and what's happening today. Here's a few world leaders. Who's this person on the left? He looks kind of familiar.
Yeah, that is Friedrich Merz, who is going to be the next German chancellor when the new parliament goes into session here in a couple of weeks.
Great. Of course, this part of the world has fantastic art, whether it's older Renaissance art, for example, on the left by Dürer, or the more modern art of Gustav Klimt. Plenty of great museums in this part of the world. Architecture too, from Baroque to medieval to, this is actually the inside of the Reichstag dome that Jim spoke of on the bottom right. And Jim, I noticed when we go to Germany, there's so many castles. What's the reason for that?
Well, these old medieval castles were basically extortion stops built by petty princesses and noblemen back in the days of the Holy Roman Empire. That's when, before a German unification, Germany consisted of these 300 states, essentially little countries, where these princes and noblemen carried out the taxation on traffic flowing through their area. So down Germany's two main rivers in that region where that picture was taken, which would be the Rhine River, which is what you see here in the picture, and then the Mosel River. So in simple sort of modern day terms, imagine these castles as toll booths on America's interstate highways, because back in those days, if you'd wanted to proceed, you'd have to pay the local tax to keep on moving downstream. So just like today, for example, if you're heading south out of Wisconsin on I-90 East and entering Illinois, you have to pay a toll. And instead of an up and down rising barrier back in the medieval days when these castles formed a function, you often had chains that were planted in the bottom of the river that were raised so that the boats couldn't proceed unless they paid the tax within the territory of these castles. And really, Dave, bringing a good flow of revenue into these towns under which the castles were located.
Great, thanks. And of course, I'm a map guy, so this is a map of Germany before it was unified, and it kind of illustrates what Jim was talking about, that Germany wasn't always one country. It was often these smaller nations, again, each trying to collect their own tolls. Of course, this part of the world is also known for its fabulous music. You got Mozart on the left, Bach on the right. And what do we try to do in our tours, Jim, to kind of bring that music to light?
Well, I think a lot of us guys really like to incorporate music into the tours to really bring the area to life. For example, when I come into Salzburg on the bus, I never miss an opportunity to play Mozart's Serenade Number 13 in G major, the da da dun 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 dun.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it really captures that mood and what it's like to enter the hometown of one of the greatest composers that the world has ever seen. And when on the Germany tour, as we're driving up to the castle where Martin Luther hid out translating the Bible back in the 1500s, we drive through a little town called Eisenach, which is the birthplace of Bach there in the picture. And so when we enter Eisenach, I always pull out my phone, I open up Spotify, I click on the album of the Brandenburg concertos and just spin the hits from Bach as we ascend up the castle. So yeah, really trying to bring that cultural history to life.
Yeah, good stuff. And of course, that music, there's the fine, orchestra music, but also it seems like every small town has their own band who's out there playing and often sipping a beer while they're doing it. So music is really everywhere. And of course, we travel to see things, but it's often the memories of people that are our greatest memories when we come back from a trip. And it's interesting, I think, to have a chance to interact with people and really build those memories. Do you have some thoughts for what the best ways are to connect with people, Jim?
I think the easiest way is to find a beer garden or a beer hall, sit down at a table where there's space and just start chatting to someone. I mean, English is so widely spoken in the places that these itineraries cover. So, why not chat someone up? I really think that you can really make so many more special memories and get to know get so much more out of traveling through the people that you just randomly get to know.
And what happens, what if you don't drink? Is it awkward to be in a beer hall setting if you don't drink?
No, take the Victualian marked beer garden in the heart of Munich. You can go in there. Yeah, you can get a beer, but they also, not only the beer gardens, but the beer halls have really upped their selection when it comes to non-alcoholic drinks. You can get non-alcoholic beer. A lot of the real major beer, the big beer companies have come out with their own non-alcoholic beer here in recent years. You can also get what I like to call a little apple juice with fuzzy water. This is called an Apfelschorle. So it's really refreshing. So if you don't drink beer, it doesn't matter because you can still get something else. You can still be part of the fun. And that's one thing that I always like to stress to tour members that, just order something else and you can still be part of the atmosphere.
Yeah, thanks. And of course, learning the language is also a key part of meeting people and talking to them because even though English is spoken, it's kind of nice to know a few words of German. I know in our tours we encourage people to do that. Would you mind giving us a little quick German lesson, Jim?
Not at all. I'd be happy to. As I just said, though, I mean, English is so widely spoken in these places that we go to, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to add a few words of the local language to our vocabularies. Being a temporary European is something that we really stress, and speaking just a little bit of the local language will, even if it's just a couple of words, I think will go a long way, and locals will really appreciate it. And you can see here on the screen here, we've got a few ways of saying hello or hi. Up here in the north to say hello to somebody, and I'll just say these out loud, and then viewers, you can just say it after me. You could say, up here in the north, we would say Guten Tag.
Guten Tag.
Yeah, Grüß Gott.
Grüß Gott.
Although that would be down in the south, you'd hear that into Munich and parts of Austria, as well as Servus.
Servus.
Servus, right. And then, of course, we say Danke for thank you.
Danke.
And you can say Danke schön, which would be thank you very much. Not what Wayne Newton says, Danke schön, it's Danke schön. And then bitte means please, so bitte.
Bitte.
And then a nice word for the beer hall for cheers would be Prost.
Prost.
And then to say goodbye, we have two ways. Would be more goodbye would be Auf Wiedersehen.
Wiedersehen.
And just simply bye would be Tschüss.
Tschüss. Tschüss.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Or Danke.
Bitte.
So we've just covered that first part of the show with Jim and I with some cultural topics and highlights. Now we're going to dive into the itineraries, and there's 6 main itineraries we're going to talk about. We'd love to talk about each one in depth, but we're going to move and paint kind of with a broad brush and move quickly. You notice too in this little kind of colored spaghetti that shows the tours, our 6 different tour routes, that there's some overlap. So the way Jim and I are going to do this is if we've covered a destination on a previous itinerary, we're not going to belabor it when we get to it if it's covered again. So in that way, I think we can kind of keep moving and get through this. We're going to start with our Best of Germany, Austria, Switzerland tour in 14 days, the classic gas tour. In this tour, in 2 weeks, you get the best kind of sampler of these countries. You see some big cities, some small towns, and incredible landscapes as well. We start off in Koblenz. Koblenz is where the Rhine and the Mosel come together, those 2 major rivers in Germany. And we head down the Mosel on our main day there. And the Mosel's kind of a sleepy cousin to the Rhine. Beautiful, slower paced, vineyards all over the place, cute little villages, and Berg-Eltz. Berg-Eltz is Rick's favorite castle, and it has been for as long as I've known him. What can you tell us about Berg-Eltz?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite as well. It's over 800 years old, making it one of the oldest castles in Germany. And remarkably, it somehow always found a way to avoid destruction throughout centuries of wars and invasions, which is really unheard of for castles of its age. And on this itinerary, we do an inside visit through the castle where you get to see how the nobles lived in such a place hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So yeah, Dave, it's not hard to see why this has long been Rick's favorite castle.
Then we head down into the Black Forest to Baden-Baden, which is a famous spa town. And Jim, I've heard you refer to this as kind of the vacation from the vacation.
Yeah, because staying overnight in this elegant spa town, it really gives you a chance to relax, to rejuvenate. And the best way to do this is going into one of the town's Roman-inspired thermal baths, as you can see right there in the picture. The one on the left is the more modern baths, and the one on the right is the more traditional one. I mean, Dave, look at the one on the right. It looks like you're about to go for a swim in the Pantheon in Rome with the
Yeah.
interior roof there.
So beautiful. Different than my local pool, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think for all of us.
Great. Then we head down into Switzerland for one of the major wow moments. This part of Switzerland, the Lauterbrunnen Valley, I would say it's a wow moment on all the different tours that we have that pass through there, not just gas tours, but our Best of Europe tour as well. You have this classic U-shaped glacier valley and a little town called Mürren where we stay. And Jim, how would your tour members spend a typical day in this part of Switzerland?
Well, this region is just a wonderful place to hike. So many various trails around the area that we stay in. They offer just super scenic walks that can be absolutely breathtaking and relatively easy to do. And you can see there in the picture that you just brought up that there are so many different signs that mark various trails and how far away a destination is. So that helps you to maintain your orientation and your sense of direction. I personally like to take it easy. So from our hotel there in Mürren, I like walking down the long mountain trail that zigzags down the mountain. Takes a good hour or so to do to this little village called Gimmelwald, while stopping off on the way at these little huts to buy cheese and sausages that are made and sold by local farmers. And then after I've arrived in Gimmelwald, I go to this inn where they have this just excellent smoky dark beer that they serve there. And out on their terrace, they have these stunning views of the Alps from just out back. And then afterwards, instead of climbing all the way back up the hill, or excuse me, the mountain, I just go right down to the gondola station and take the gondola on a 15-minute ride back up the mountain to Mürren. And Dave, that's one interesting nugget about this area is that, instead of using public transport in the big cities by trains and subways, in this area, we're using gondolas as our public transport in this part of the world here.
Wow. Sign me up. Wish I was there now. And of course, after all that hiking, gathering around the fondue pot and reliving the day's adventures is always a nice thing to do. Then we head from Switzerland into Germany to Munich, with the capital of Bavaria that we've talked about a little bit before. Culture and tradition is everywhere there. You want a big pretzel, you got it. Wonderful Baroque architecture, great modern art too. We got Dürer again on the left, and then one of my favorites, Kandinsky, on the right. And then, of course, Munich is maybe synonymous with the Oktoberfest. And tell us about this great festival, Jim.
It's a blast. It's the world's largest annual beer festival that celebrates Bavarian culture with beer and food and music. And this is where you definitely wear those traditional Bavarian clothing that we talked about earlier. And the festival's roots go all the way back to a royal wedding back at the turn of the 19th century when a celebration was held and the whole town was invited. And the wedding celebration was such a success that it was eventually decided to be turned into an annual event. And so today, despite its name, it mostly takes place in September so that you can take advantage of better weather, and extends then into early October. And if you go there, you can definitely expect massive beer tents like this one here in the picture, carnival rides, lively crowds, and just plenty and plenty of hearty German food.
Wow, fantastic. And so for the people who are thinking about taking a tour that goes through Munich, they can probably check our website and then see if their tour is going to be going through Munich at that time. And then you'll have a chance to dive into it.
Most certainly.
Uh, Then we take a look at the castle of Neuschwanstein, one of the highlights of Germany. I always think it's important to think about German words. They can be kind of intimidating because they're so long and like a railroad car, but if you break them up into smaller words, you can kind of make sense of it. So Neuschwanstein, pronounced actually more like Neuschwanstein, and it means new swan stone. So if you can break it up into those small words, and this was the castle that Ludwig built. It was he grew up in a castle below that built this new castle up on the rock. And of course, the swan has to do with he was very fascinated with Wagner and those operas, and those were based on a lot of sagas, including Lohengrin, which had the swan in it. So take a look at German words. They look long, but break them down and they can make some more sense. Then we head to Salzburg, across the border from Munich. Salzburg is another wow moment. Salzburg is one of those towns to me that's a great size, not too big, not too small, but plenty to see and do. And of course, Salzburg is extremely grateful to Julie Andrews and The Sound of Music on the right, and of course, being the birthplace of Mozart. So those two twin musical aspects of Salzburg make it very popular with tourists. But what I like to do in Salzburg is get up early or walk around late in the evening when you can have the streets more to yourself. And it really is just a lovely, lovely town. Then we head down the Danube for a more sobering place. And I know, Jim, that Rick has always believed that visiting a concentration camp can be a very powerful experience if you're prepared the right way. How do you prepare your groups for a place like Mauthausen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important that people understand the historical context before going to a memorial site like Mauthausen. And I also think it's so important for our travelers to understand before we get there how on earth the Nazis were able to bring these concentration camps into existence after they seized power back in 1933. And when we get to the site, I always encourage our travelers to be observant, to listen, to reflect on what they learn when it comes to all the horrific stories of forced labor, the horrible suffering, and the mass brutality, the mass murder that occurred there. Um, but you know, Dave, a place like Mauthausen, it's not just about what happened. It's also about why it happened and what that means for us today. You know, these concentration camp memorials are so important because they give us a deeper understanding and a deeper sense of this history's weight and what's at stake when we forget history.
Right, thank you. Yeah, the memories there, and I think the people that survive these camps, their main memory or message to all of us is to never forget this happened. And I think by visiting a camp, keep that alive. Then we head to the Milk Abbey, the very beautiful Baroque abbey along the Danube. Then we take a trip on the Danube where everyone's humming Strauss tunes to themselves, and then on to Vienna, the huge cultural capital. We talked about Vienna being the capital of the original Habsburg Empire. Now it's the capital of a relatively small country, Austria, but still just brings this magnificence everywhere you look. It's a lovely city to walk around in the pedestrian center. You're sure to come across people dressed like Mozart that want to talk you into going to their Mozart concert. And so that's all in good fun. And again, music is just everywhere. You can go to the opera house, take a tour, or actually see a performance if you want. And of course, with all that music, it makes you make you kind of hungry. So definitely sit down and get up close and personal with a Viennese pastry like a soccer tort. We talked about the great art there before. The Kiss by Klimt on the right, work by Rubens on the left. That's in the famous Kunsthistorische Museum. But Jim, you were telling me you had a favorite museum in Vienna. And honestly, I've never been inside this museum. I know the movie The Third Man. I love that movie. But I guess there's a Third Man museum. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we take our groups here. It's such a neat experience because the curator, Gerhard, who you can see there on the left with me last fall, he has devoted just a lifetime's work collecting artifacts about the film and the popularity around the world that it received. And he uses that as sort of a context to present Vienna's immediate pre-World War II history, and then the aftermath of Vienna when it was occupied by the victorious Allies, and then the challenges of denazification and setting up a new economic and political order for Austria. And it's a really interesting activity because it covers a history that I think a lot of our tour members are not expecting when they think of Vienna, because as you know, Dave, it's so easy for us to get caught up on the Habsburgs this, the Habsburgs that, when you get into town. So this really has you look at Viennese history from a really unique perspective.
Great. And we're going to talk about the Munich, Salzburg, Vienna tour real quickly. And basically, this tour is half of the gas tour. So once you get to Munich on the gas tour, that second half is what this tour is all about. So it's a great tour if you have limited time, you want to hit these highlights, and also if you enjoy Christmas markets and you can take the trip in November and December. This is also something that's really worthwhile. So you can check our website and see if a Christmas market fits in with your plans. Now we're going to move on to the Best of Germany tour. And this tour and our Switzerland tour are deep dives into a single country. So if you're really interested in getting under the surface, learning about the countries in a little more depth, these are the tours for you. What I like about this tour is it combines both the former West Germany and the former East Germany and shows aspects of both. I know it's kind of a loaded question, Jim, but could you briefly talk about how the reunification of Germany has gone since 1989?
Yeah, well, I mean, in a nutshell, it's had its ups and downs. It has brought that political map there, as well as two economic systems together, basically overnight. But the mindsets, the wallets, the infrastructure have taken a longer time to catch up. And this is due to the fact that political reunification happened so fast after the wall fell, faster than anyone had initially expected. And for example, in the early 90s, many East German companies and factories were bought up after the reunification. They were restructured or just simply shut down. And this led to massive unemployment in a place under communism where there just was no such thing as unemployment. And now you had issues like homelessness and inequality, which barely existed under East Germany, now suddenly became a thing. And so these new challenges also introduced new taxes to send money eastward to raise living standards and improve infrastructure. And this is a tax that still exists today. But I think, despite these hardships, Dave, what's really important to keep in mind is that in 1990, just over 16 million people, including my wife's entire family, gained basic freedoms that they didn't have for 40 years under communism. Freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom to travel.
Wow.
And, these new freedoms, I think really in a lot of ways are just, outweigh these, economic hoops that Germany has had to jump through since the reunification.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hamburg is where our Germany tour starts. And I know, Jim, you've stood in this very spot looking out at the harbor there. And what do you tell your groups about the significance of this place?
Yeah, you're looking at the Elbe River, which flows north to the North Sea here through the port city there of Hamburg. And Hamburg was a major city where many German immigrants left for the United States back in the 19th century and early 20th century. And so what I say to my tour members is, look out there at that port. If you claim to have German heritage, there's a very good chance that your ancestors left for America from right there. Because from 1820 to 1957, more than 6 million people emigrated from Germany to the United States. And Hamburg, major port city, is where a lot of people left from. So yeah, really moving stuff, Dave, when you think about it.
Yeah. Then we head down from Hamburg. We have a night in Munster, a nice little small town that kind of breaks our journey before we get to a stop in Cologne to see this amazing Gothic cathedral. And then we're on to the Rhine, where we settle in for a couple days. Another wow moment that we have. Jim talking about the fact that there's so many castles along this one stretch of the river. You can't just turn your eye without seeing another castle. We stay in this beautiful little town of Bacharach and do a lot of exploring. Then we head down the so-called romantic road to Rothenburg, your classic medieval half-timbered town. And there always seems to be a festival going on in Rothenburg. The streets are often pretty crowded. And I got to tell you, I'm not a morning person, but I always tell my groups to get up early in Rothenburg and walk the wall. You can go around almost the entire part of the city on this elevated walkway. And it's really a wonderful way to get a feel for this classic medieval town. Then we're back down to Munich. We've talked about that before, so we can kind of skip through that. And from Munich, we head up to Erfurt. And I know Erfurt isn't exactly on a lot of people's tourist map, but why did we go to Erfurt, Jim?
Well, I think it's just one of those hidden gems in Germany that many people tend to overlook, probably because it was part of East Germany for 40 years after World War II. But it's a city that is just jam-packed with history. Lots of charm, as you can see there in the picture. This is also Martin Luther's old stomping ground, because Erfurt is the city where he studied at the university. It's also the city where he was ordained as a priest. So on many levels, you could argue that the seeds of the Reformation were planted right here in Erfurt. And there's the castle that he hid out in, translating the Bible. And also, Dave, we mustn't forget the culinary side of this particular region. Erfurt is the capital of the German state of Thuringia, which is the home to the famous Thüringer Roast-Bratwurst, which is a beloved grilled sausage that's been around for over 500-600 years. And for my money, the tastiest bratwurst in Germany, something that, as you can see, my kids can really attest to, Dave.
Yeah, oh, that sounds good. I wish I had one of those right now. I'm hungry. And from Erfurt, we head up through Dresden for a quick stop on the way to Berlin. And forgive this grainy slide, everybody, but this is my first view of Berlin when I went in the early 80s. And you walk up to this famous Brandenburg Gate, and you've got a wall there. And if you walked up to that wall, they would warn you. If you tried to climb over that little wall, they might shoot you. It's hard to imagine that because obviously a gate is not meant to be a dead end, but it was for all those years. But you go back there today, and from this very spot, it looks quite different. Now you can walk through that Brandenburg Gate. And as the little wow up in the corner attests, Berlin is really a wow moment just because there's so much history there and you just feel like you're in the middle of history that's happening even today. Just real quick layout of Berlin. This white area is West Berlin, which used to be an island in the middle of East Germany during the Cold War. It was administered by the French, British, and the Americans. And there were a few checkpoints you could use as a tourist if you wanted to cross over into East Berlin, that tan area over there. One of those is Checkpoint Charlie. I remember when I went through Checkpoint Charlie, it looked very different than it does today. What is Checkpoint Charlie like today, Jim?
Well, it is basically a big Hollywood set, what a lot of people like to say, because everything is a replica of its original. You can see where there was once a void between two pre-war buildings. Off to the right is a McDonald's. There's a KFC to the left. These actors here with their American flags charging tourists a euro to take a picture. It's just it might seem a little superficial, but you have to remember that this is one of the most important symbols of the city's Cold War history. And so therefore they've got the Checkpoint Charlie Museum just to the left that has all these escape stories that people ingeniously came up with, the ways to escape after the wall was built. They've got information boards around the side of the perimeter of the site to really educate and highlight those big moments in the city's Cold War history.
Great. Yeah, it's hard to imagine what it was like. There's Russian soldiers, with a flag on the Reichstag. And Berlin today is so different. It's evolving every day. There's that dome of the Reichstag that Jim has talked about before. And here's the view of what it's like when you go inside the dome. There's a lot of symbolism going on here, isn't there?
There is. This is become one of the most iconic pieces of modern architecture in the entire country. This glass dome, it was part of the restoration of the Reichstag to prepare it to be the capital building of the reunified Germany once again. And this was done by a British architect. And it's really a symbol of democracy because you can see how you go up to the roof of the Reichstag and then you continue where these people are standing and you can ascend all the way to the top of the dome. And if you look to the right, those are mirrors. And you can't necessarily see down into the parliament. You can see the purple seats here and there, but the politicians down in the parliament can always see you. And so if the politicians ever need a reminder as to why they are there in the parliament, and if they need a reminder as to whom they serve, all they have to do is just take a look up and they see the people walking above them. And it is always a reminder that the people are always above their elected leaders.
Wow. Another powerful monument is this one. It doesn't look like a monument at first, but I know there's also a lot of symbolism going on here.
Yeah, that is the memorial dedicated to the murdered Jews of Europe. It is one of the first memorials that was built by the reunified government, opened up back in 2005, that pays tribute to the 6 million Jews that were murdered during the Nazi dictatorship. It's an abstract memorial, which means that it's open to interpretation. It consists of 2,711 blocks. And you just basically try to come up with your own reasons as to why it was built the way it was, thinking in the context of the Holocaust, for example, thinking in the context of the persecution of the Jewish people, asking yourself questions. And so, yeah, it's just a very powerful, very thought-provoking memorial. And for me, Dave, what I always find after all these years so striking is its location. I mean, look what you're looking at there in the distance. You've got the American Embassy. Right behind it is the Brandenburg Gate, and then you've got the Reichstag building, and behind you is the Potsdamer Platz, like the Times Square of Berlin. When people come to Berlin, they are going to see this memorial. It couldn't have been put in a more prominent spot here in the heart of the German capital. And by doing so, I don't think that the German capital could have been sending a clearer message that moving forward as a reunified nation, that they are very serious about confronting this history and paying tribute to the victims who perished as a result of it.
And of course, everybody wants to come and see the Berlin Wall, and most of it is gone now, but you do occasionally see memorials like this or little indicators in the pavement that tell you where it is. There's also this, is this the topography of terror, which it's open all the time, right? Right, Jim?
Yeah, 7 days a week. It looks to give us a thorough understanding of the two terror networks of the Nazis, those being the SS and Gestapo, which were headquartered right here at this location. It's free. All the information has been translated into English. And here's a good example of how the city confronts this Nazi past today by educating anybody that's willing to come and learn more about it.
And of course, beautiful Berlin Cathedral and the monument or that TV tower built by the East Germans. What's that building in the distance there?
That is the replica of the Old City Palace that housed the dynasty of the House of Hohenzollern. This is the family that ruled that mighty kingdom of Prussia up until 1918, and the German Empire up until 1918. You know, when visitors come to Berlin today, it's so easy for them to, I think, get caught up on the 20th century history. But these sites that you see right here tell us that Berlin has a much richer history that precedes its tumultuous 20th century one. And you can visit the cathedral today. You can go inside the replica palace. It's been turned into a place of culture, but nevertheless a reminder of that old history that Berlin has.
And of course, Berlin has some really modern places too.
Yeah, and so this is the Potsdamer Platz, again, like sort of the Times Square of Berlin. This was the liveliest square in all of Germany prior to World War II, where you had the best entertainment venues, the best shopping opportunities. But then, as a result of Berlin being the target of Allied bombs for 5 years, much of the Potsdamer Platz just lay in ruin by the time 1945 rolled around. And then in 1961, when the Berlin Wall was built, the wall went right over the Potsdamer Platz. And so, imagine going to New York City today, tearing down all the buildings on Times Square, building a wall across it. I mean, it's inconceivable to think about, but on many levels, that's what happened here. And so, in the mid 90s, as Berlin enters that big post-reunification building boom, this was a square that city leaders knew that they really wanted to bring back to life, invite architects to submit proposals from around the world that would have this new flourishing architecture that would really send messages that Berlin has really reestablished itself as a modern day European capital.
Wow. And of course, in the corners of Berlin, you often find these beautiful little beer gardens, a little different vibe than a Munich beer garden, but still a wonderful place to relax. That's our Germany tour. Now we're going to dive into the best of Switzerland tour. And Switzerland is a very interesting country. It's small, not much bigger than New Jersey, but there's 4 different languages there. Do you want to talk about some of that cultural aspect of Switzerland?
Yeah, I mean, it's just Switzerland is just the landscape, the culture. It's so diverse for a country that is, as small as New Jersey or as Maryland. And the fact also, Switzerland is the home of 4 official languages: German, French, Italian, and a lesser known and spoken one called Romansh. So just think about that. I mean, a country, again, the size of New Jersey, Maryland, that has four languages in it. And but that it's a reflection of the impact of all the various blends of influence that Switzerland's neighboring countries have had on it. And traveling through Switzerland is such a treat because of all the contrasting traditions and cuisines that you'll find within the borders of Switzerland.
And of course, one of those cuisines is chocolate, and there's how you say it in the 4 different languages. Our tour begins in Lucerne, and everyone talks about how great the Swiss mountains are, and they are. But boy, there's some really wonderful cities there too, and Lucerne is one of those. Then we head over into the eastern part to the Appenzell. It's a less touristed area, can very much tied into their cow culture, famous Appenzeller cheese. Then we go down to the Italian part of Switzerland. That's the area known as Ticino. The main town there is Lugano. And there you have gelato and pasta and palm trees and flowers. You really do feel like you're in northern Italy. And in fact, northern Italy is just right across the border. Then on to French-speaking Switzerland, to Lake Geneva. We stay in Lausanne, which is a town just down the lake from here. We definitely take a lake trip. There's a beautiful castle, the Chateau Chillon, that we go to visit. And it's interesting to get that French flavor there with vineyards and French cuisine, and of course, people speaking French all around you. Back up into the Berner Oberland to that Lauterbrunnen Valley, which we've talked about before. And then we end our tour in Switzerland in Bern, in the beautiful capital, one of my favorite smaller towns in Europe, built on the hairpin bend of this beautiful river. Now we're going to talk about our Berlin, Prague, and Vienna tour. This is a tour for history lovers. If you want to dive into some of the great cultural capitals of Europe, this is really the tour for you. Starting in our old friend Berlin. And Jim mentioned to me that on the Berlin portion of this tour, we dive into some of Berlin's international heritage.
Yeah, this is a district called Kreuzberg, which is just south of the city center, an area that saw a lot of immigration after World War II. West Berlin needed so many workers to rebuild its city, and so they opened their doors to the so-called guest worker, where Italians, Greeks, and Turks came to. And the Turkish population there today is seen all around the district, and you can see the Istanbul supermarket there in the background. A lot of Turkish stands, the Turkish market nearby, Turkish restaurants. And so what we do is we try to dive in to give our travelers a sense of this kind of cultural history of Berlin, this post-war cultural history. And it's, just a really unique insight into this social aspect about the city.
Great. Then we go down to Dresden, and Dresden is one of those cities where they left some of their famous monuments in ruins even after the wall came down. This was their famous Frauenkirche on the left in 95. Here's how it is today, where it's been lovingly rebuilt brick by brick. It's one of our guides, Katarina, leading a tour in Dresden. A great art museum there. And Jim, this is one of your favorites, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Old Masters Gallery, and this is where you see the golden age of European paintings on display. You're looking at Raphael's breathtaking Sistine Madonna there. Just so many wonderful artifacts in other museums, but other paintings that just really represent the high culture that Dresden's all about.
And then on to Prague. And Prague is another wow moment, the beautiful capital of the Czech Republic. Maybe one of the most amazing cities in Europe from an architectural point of view. It was never bombed very much. And so you have Gothic and Renaissance and Baroque and Art Nouveau styles side by side. A great city to wander at night, just dripping with atmosphere. These are some of the stained glass windows of the Czech artist Alphonse Mucha in the Art Nouveau style. And then we kind of change the pace and stay in a small Czech town, Český Krumlov, on the way from Prague south. And it's kind of a nice place to get some respite and a small town flavor before we dive back into some of the bigger towns, like Vienna, where the tour ends. And Vienna, we've talked about before, but we have not talked about the Wiener Schnitzel, which you definitely got to sample when you're there. So that's our Berlin, Prague, and Vienna tour. We're going to close it out with our My Way Alpine Europe tour. This is a tour that starts in Salzburg, goes down to the Dolomites, up into Füssen in Germany, and ends through Switzerland, and then ends in Chamonix. My Way kind of means, we got Frank Sinatra there, and perhaps those hikers are singing My Way, or maybe they're singing Climb Every Mountain, or maybe they're just yodeling. But My Way means you're taking a tour that is not fully guided. You have an escort that helps you orient you and gives you a lot of advice along the way, but pretty much what you do during the day is on your own. These kind of tours tend to attract a lot of people who enjoy hiking, not surprisingly. Starting in Salzburg, then we stay in Füssen. Other tours that we have just really kind of dip into Füssen just kind of shortly, but on this tour you stay in Füssen for a couple days. So you have Neuschwanstein and the Hohenschwangau Castle on the right, where Ludwig grew up. You can really take a deep dive into Ludwig history and his castles. Then we go down to the Dolomites, those jagged peaks of northern Italy, one of a lot of people's favorite European landscapes. And then back to our old friend, the Lauterbrunnen Valley, before we end up in Chamonix. And Chamonix, of course, is where the tallest Alp is, Mount Blanc, that you see in the distance. And what's amazing about Chamonix, we talked about this before in the general topics of how accessible the mountains are. From the center of Chamonix, you take a lift up, boom, you're up at 11,000 feet. So Chamonix, for a mountain lover, doesn't get much better. And having a fondue at the end of the day is a nice way to cap it all off. So those are our 6 itineraries. Like I say, we move kind of quickly through them, but if you want more details and day-by-day itineraries, take a look at our website and there's more detail. And if you want to put yourself in this picture, Jim, I'm just curious what people can expect from you or other Rick Steves guides.
Yeah, I mean, we're here for to make sure that our travelers have a wonderful experience. We are there to provide cultural and historical context, to run an efficient ship, efficient Rick Steves style of travel, and yeah, try to also get you to learn some independent travel skills, so that even though that you're traveling with a group, you can go out and make your own memories and have your own experiences.
Yeah, great. So with that, we're going to say Auf Wiedersehen. But
Auf
before we
Wiedersehen.
completely say goodbye, Jim and I wanted to give you a little quiz, and Lisa is actually going to launch this quiz on Zoom now for those of you at home. And here's the questions that we are going to ask you, and it kind of is a way for Jim and I to tell how well you've been paying attention the last hour or so. First of all, in what year did the Berlin Wall fall? And secondly, how many languages are spoken in Switzerland? Question 3, in which town was Mozart born? Question 4. How do you say hello in Munich? Jim taught us that in his language lesson, and we'll see if you can recall that. And finally, which castle is Rick's favorite? So ponder those for a sec and answer in the chat. And now here are the answers to those questions. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. There are 4 languages spoken in Switzerland. Salzburg is Mozart's hometown. Grüß Gott is how you'd say hello in Munich. And Rick's favorite castle, Berg-Eltz. Thank you very much for listening to Jim and I talk about Germany, Austria, Switzerland. We hope you felt like we took you on a virtual tour and gave you just a little taste of what these tours have to offer. Now we're going to turn things over to Lisa for the question and answer. Take it away, Lisa.
Hello, gentlemen. Dankeschön.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice presentation. Could you see how well our viewers did with the poll results?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look. How'd they do?
They did excellently. They did between 81 and 92%. So they were paying attention.
Impressive.
Great.
So I wanted to just very quickly share my screen for a second and say a couple of words about a reminder that the giveaway is happening at the end of the week. So we want you to register for that, and that the early booking discount is happening with no promo code needed from now until July 7th. And again, we still have tours on sale for 2025. So, but now it is time for you guys to finish up your work for the evening and answer some questions.
Okay.
So I will start off with one. I think you both can answer this, but maybe Jim, it would make a little bit more sense. Wesley wants to know, he's traveling this fall from Berlin to Munich, and he wants to know, should he fly or take the train?
Well, I would take the train because it eliminates all the hassle of getting to the airport early, everything that can go wrong with flying. It's only an hour flight, but whenever I go to Munich, I always take the train. It takes me 3 hours and 50 minutes on the high-speed German train, the Intercity Express, and you just sit down, you let the driver take care of everything, and then you turn up in Munich right at Central Station. Definitely take the train.
And you don't have to repack your liquids either.
That's another thing too. And also too, and if you book in advance, you can actually get some pretty darn good deals on tickets as well.
Great. Dave, do you have anything you would like to add? A counterpoint? I imagine not.
No, Jim was saying he's going to take that very train to start your tour, right? In a few days. And I can remember when that train from Berlin to Munich was an overnight train. It was like 8 or 9 hours. Now you just zip around. It's incredible what the Germans and other Europeans have done with those high-speed network.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a good museum on immigration in Hamburg?
Yes, there is the Ballstadt Immigration Museum, and so we talked about that slide about the how Hamburg was the major port city for where a lot of Germans left out of, and that museum tells the story of this. And it's not just in Hamburg, but Bremerhaven also has one. That was another big port city, and so yeah, these museums do a great job in telling that history and what it meant for the individual who emigrated out of Germany.
Thank you. All right, Dave, you get to answer this one. Teresa would like to know, what is your favorite city in Austria to visit?
Oh, gosh. I would have to say I'm a big fan of Hallstatt. I know it's a tricky place because it's become all Instagram famous now, but I can't think of a more beautiful city or town in a more beautiful setting than Hallstatt.
Oh, I really thought you were going to go with Vienna with the museums.
I was thinking about it, but I kind of leaning towards Hallstatt right now. Maybe I'm in a small town mood.
That can be, that can be. Jim, this is definitely for you. Julie wants to know what percentage of the tour members go to the nude baths in Baden-Baden?
Tour members, I would probably say about 10% would go there. But you know, you shouldn't be afraid to go there because everybody looks the same. But I understand that there are those issues of people feeling uncomfortable, and that's why the modern spot to go to is where you would wear a swimming suit to feel more comfortable. But yeah, it's usually a small percentage of tour members that actually go to the nude one.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Tina was suggested by her friends that she try Rodler because she doesn't really drink alcohol. Can you explain what Rodler is and give some other non-alcoholic options besides Rodler? And besides cola?
Yeah, so Radler is a combination of beer and typically Sprite. And it's really refreshing, actually. It's nice to have on a real hot day. You don't get so tipsy so quickly, which is always a nice thing if you want to do a lot of sightseeing and you have a full day and just want a breather. The other thing that I like to drink, I think I mentioned earlier, was the Apfelschorle, or this apple juice with carbonated water. That's also very refreshing. Of course, you're going to have your different soft drinks, sodas, and whatnot. But yeah, and then as Dave and I were saying earlier, you've got all these non-alcoholic beers that have really come onto the scene as well. So, if the concern is, boy, I don't drink alcohol, but I want to still, enjoy a nice beverage, there's always going to be something that at least is interesting to try if you don't know exactly what it is.
Can I add something as somebody who guides tours that go through Germany? What happens to the tour members when they order lemonade? What do they get? In Germany,
Dave?
when they order lemonade, don't they get Sprite?
Is that they call limonata, or what do they call?
Yeah, whenever my tour members, I'm sitting at the beer hall with my tour members, and they want something, and the server goes, "Well, what about some lemonade?" And they go, "Oh yeah," and then the server brings some lemonade, and it's Sprite or 7-Up, and it has nothing to do with lemons. Does this not happen to either one of you? Just me?
No, I have had the experience of being in Italy in the old days where you'd have tour members asking for latte and they would get a glass of milk. Maybe it's something along those lines. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't say that it's ever happened to me, but I guess I can understand why that would be the case because Sprite with the logo has the lemon, and so perhaps they think that that's the same. It's hard to say exactly what the server's thinking, but no, it's never happened to me. Fortunately, I guess.
Okay. Paula wants to know, on a more serious note, how are Americans being received in the regions that we're talking about today this year?
I think generally speaking, well, especially I can really only speak for Berlin. Since I haven't been out on the road yet. But talking to people that have come to Berlin from other countries, other cities, there really hasn't been any issues. I mean, I can certainly understand that how Americans are perceived today is something that is concerning to a lot of our travelers. But I living here for almost 20 years now, I'd have to say that as it relates to Germany and even Europeans in general know the difference between everyday people and politics. They're used to different leaders coming and going here, and they're not going to hold you personally responsible for you know anything that's happening in your own country. If anything, I would say that people usually appreciate it when they see Americans making the effort to travel outside of their country to learn about the experiences of other cultures and connect to new people. and even to connect to the unknown parts of themselves. And if anything, I'm willing to bet that you'd probably run into more people over here who are curious about you and happy to chat with you instead of being judgmental.
Thank you. Okay, one last question. Joy would like to know what part of Germany has the best pretzels?
Is that more of a Bavarian thing, Jim? I honestly, I don't know.
I mean, we eat them a lot up here in the north as well. You go to a bakery just down the street. It's always the low-hanging fruit for when the kids are hungry. Over the years here, it's been, because there's always the pretzels. But I'd have to say that Bavaria really does it right when it comes to the pretzel, probably because of the size. Here's just a standard smaller size, but down in the south, you'll see such a variety of different sizes. And, if the whole idea is to have a nice big old liter of beer and a big pretzel, you're going to sit there, you're going to enjoy the atmosphere. Yeah, I like my pretzels big, and I like the beer coming in a big mug as well.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us tonight. I would like to invite everyone to join us again tomorrow night when we're going to be talking about Spain and Portugal. But if you would all say goodbye to our viewers, please, in your favorite language other than English.
I'll use Danish. I'll say vi ses.
And I'll say Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night.